Well, we're 5 weeks in already. We've been reading the Bible together for over a month. It's been great so far, but I think we do need a little bit of a recap. We know, chapter 1, in the beginning, God was here before anything else. God brought the whole universe to life and made us a good and perfect place to live, and came to be with us, and only asked us to trust our Creator. We had some trouble with that. We got convinced that we could be like God, and so sin became a thing in the world. And the rest of the story, from there on out, tells about how God has been trying to get us back and save us from sin. God decided to build a nation that would bless the rest of the world and show all other human beings how great life can be when we live in a right relationship with our Creator. But along the way, we humans did what we do best, and we messed things up a little bit. But God promised Abraham and Sarah that their descendants would be a great nation who would live in a land of plenty, flowing with milk and honey. And God was determined to make good on that promise. So God chose Moses, a fugitive shepherd who was slow of speech, to lead the Israelites out of Egypt to the promised land. It seemed like an interesting choice, but with God's help, they were freed from slavery. And so once everybody was out and together, it was time to establish some ground rules, right? You see, the people of the Middle East during that time were very religious, but that meant they had many gods. And while they were in Egypt, they hadn't heard from God for a while, and they probably had fun at the festivals with their Egyptian friends. This was a big problem for God. I mean, think about it. If you created the universe, you'd probably want some acknowledgement of that, I guess. So God set out to give some guidelines, some rules for the Israelites, and those began by addressing this very religious variety that they seem to have. So, number 1 of the 10 Commandments, the message says, I am God, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of slavery. Have no other gods, only me. And number 2, no carved gods of any size, shape, or form of anything. Don't bow down to them and don't serve them, because I am God, your God. A little repetitive, huh? These first 2 commandments seem kind of like overkill, but clearly they needed to be said, and said twice, because at the very time God was giving these new rules to Moses, the chosen people of Israel were building themselves an idol to worship. Now, Moses had been up on the mountain for a while. I understand their anxiety, right, of where their leader has gone. We're out here in the wilderness. I'm not sure why they thought a golden calf would be a good replacement for Moses. And I have no idea why Aaron would encourage them and enable their idolatry. I suppose since they were used to having visual representations of gods, and they were worried Moses had died or abandoned them, Aaron thought, well, let's melt down our gold earrings and make ourselves an idol. Aaron gets the tiniest bit of credit here because he did try to merge their pagan practices that they were familiar with the worship of this God they were just getting to know again. If you remember, Aaron molded the calf out of gold, but he said that worshiping and making these sacrifices to it would be a festival to the Lord. Not quite sure how he thought that would work. And clearly, the Israelites who were worshiping the golden calf did not think it was the God of their ancestors while they danced and partied in celebration. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer for us today. They messed up. They were immature in their faith, and clearly they didn't know God very well. Those first two commandments, not to have gods before God and not to worship idols, we just sort of skip right over those. Yeah. Those are for the Israelites. A few of the other 8 can be tough, but those first 2 are no big deal, right? Well, I don't know. I remember when I was out in Buffalo, there were several good Christians who never seemed to make it to church during football season because they had season tickets to the Bills games, but they told me a lot of prayer happens at those games. Yeah, just like worshiping the golden calf was a festival to the Lord. We think idolatry is a sin of the ancient world, that we don't really need to worry about it too much. But just turn on your TV and pay attention. I can't believe that this really happened this week, but right after I read chapter 5, I happened to turn on the TV and I saw this commercial.
Hey, can you put the game on?
Game's not on yet.
Ooh! Thou should know that Fox and FS1 has great college football games.
I didn't know. Wait, boss?
Silence, mortal! How could thou not know? It's every Saturday.
Be gone!
What?
Don't anger the football gods. Honor thy Saturday. Now, I know, well, at least I hope, that the makers of this commercial don't claim to be Christian. And that's fine. That's their choice. We certainly can't expect everything on TV to be Christian. But we as Christians have to realize this is what football has become in our country. We may still be able to enjoy the sport without worshiping it. I certainly do. But for many, it has become a religion, complete with rituals and rules and sacrifices. We start our kids young in the practice, teaching them the ways. We have our favorite idols that we cheer for. Now, we know it's not just football, though, either, don't we? We have all kinds of our own golden calves today. Pay attention. Look at the way celebrities are worshipped, or how so many people would do anything, would sacrifice anything for their own little bit of fame. It's easy to see how wealth is worshipped in our world today. But what about comfort? Our physical needs, indulgence, keeping up appearances, or simply me, myself. Gotta look out for number 1. If we can get anything out of reading the Bible together, let's learn from the mistakes of those who've gone before us. Let's recognize the patterns we see happening again. We, like the Israelites, maybe we were we are missing our leader. You know, Jesus ascended to heaven, and it's been a while since we've seen him last. I think, you know, sometimes people do just get bored or distracted. But whatever it is, they simply forget that God is still here. One way or another, our attention gets pulled away from worshiping our God. Did you notice how often God says that? I am God, your God. We exist because of God. But it almost seems God exists for us, doesn't it? Everything God does has been to get our attention, to get us back on track, to show us how good life can be when we live in harmony with our Creator and with each other. That's what the Ten Commandments are all about. God is all for us. Everything God does is for us. Can we be all for God? Can we keep God just a notch above everything else this life flashes in front of us? God gives us even a simple way to help keep tabs on ourselves. This chapter is titled New Commandments, which we get, and a New Covenant. The covenant God established with the Israelites was a system of sacrificing. For them, it was sacrificing animals, which seems awful and barbaric to us today. But the theory is still the same. What we make the most sacrifices for is ultimately what we worship. God wanted them to back up their words with some action. And for them, sacrificing the best, the most perfect animals of their flocks that they worked hard to tend and grow, the flesh that they relied on for sustenance and life, giving that up was no easy task. It might be like burning up the best product of your work. The thing that you've made, that you take the most pride in, just giving that away. It reminds me of the Buddhist monks who make those incredible sand mandalas. They spend hours with little tubes lining up different colored sand to create this beautiful piece of art. And then they take the table it's on outside and let the wind just blow that work of art away. It seems crazy, but this is exactly what God did for us through Christ, who sacrificed his perfect life to show us that God would do anything for us. So the question is, where do we make the most sacrifices? I would do anything for. God is all for you. May we work together to be all for God. Amen.